Direction Point! Direction Point!
A Doctor Who podcast network.
Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to Doctor Who Literature. This is a bonus episode. As you know, on this show, ordinarily we look at the Doctor Who novelizations put out by Target Books from 1973 onward, one book every week in publication order. After every calendar year's worth of books, I do a bonus episode. We are now at the end of the 1984 books, and that concluded last week with episode 91, Frontios. Next week, episode 92, we'll cover book 93, Planet of Fire, the first of the 1985 novelizations, and published slightly out of sequence, with book 92 coming in episode 93, the week after that, The Caves of Androzani. But it is time for a bonus episode where we do not follow the books in publication order. Bonus episodes feature interviews with or conversations about other Doctor Who writers and topics that are related to or semi-related to Target novelizations. These are meant to give the show more of a broader focus and hopefully to serve as an introduction to the Target novelizations to other listeners. To that end, this week I am absolutely thrilled to have as a guest on the show Mr. Andrew Smith, a Doctor Who episode writer and a Doctor Who novelization author. From Full Circle, the Season 18 classic that, as many of you know, is one of my favorite Doctor Who stories of all time. We have already covered the Full Circle novelization on this show, back in episode 71, with co-producer Jim Sangster, but now we are going to hear from the man himself. So, without any further introduction, let's get to it.
The Vervoids are probably the best dirty joke in Doctor Who.
They're hermaphroditic plants.
A lot of plants are.
So there you go. It's based on science.
No, they'll ship anything.
There are probably 11 and handle shippers out there. You just have to drill a hole where his mouth is, and you're all set.
You know he needs the room. I've seen it in pictures.
I'm not saying you're not a fan. I'm saying you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Doctor Who gives a drunken Doctor Who podcast for the end times. You are listening to Doctor Who Literature. Keep turning the pages!
I am absolutely ecstatic to have my next guest sitting down with me. Long-time listeners of this podcast will know that this is a Season 18 house, and that I have spent a lot of time in the past talking about how much the story and the book Full Circle means to me, and I am sitting here today with Andrew Smith, the author of Full Circle, both TV and novelization. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
Jason, thank you so much for asking me. Recently discovered the podcast thanks to Jim Sangster, and I've loved it, and I think you do a great job. And as I said on social media, it's kind of reignited my Target love as well, and I'm going back to the books that I read as a kid, loving it.
In many ways, the format of this podcast was a failure of the imagination, because I started doing this during the pandemic when we were still in the later stages of lockdown, and I began by just reading out my old blog posts about the first 16 books, which in publication order is the early to mid-70s. The format has expanded, so now I have guests, and now I am writing new scripts for books that I never blogged about. But I never envisioned a time when I would have the authors of the books listening to the podcast and appearing on the show. But the show is a much better place for the participation of people like you and Philip Hinchcliffe and so many others.
Yeah, but it's just such a great listen, and I've notched up quite a few listens now, and it just does that lovely thing. Some of the books I remember so fondly reading as a kid, before we had VHS tapes even. We just, here in the UK, we just watched the show a Saturday night, and then it was gone. Some shows we get a repeat of if we were lucky in the summer or at Christmas. But otherwise, we just waited for those books to come out once a month and revisit the show through them. And there's a lot of the episodes are about those books that I remember dropping onto my mat through mail order, or the ones that I go into my local high street and get them on the day they came out. Yeah. Going back, my very first one I got was in October 1975.
October 75. So that was in the infancy of the Target line, almost. Let me see if I can figure out through my publication order notes. The August 75 book would have been Doctor Who and the Green Death. Was that your first?
Nope, I got 3 because I was holidaying in Blackpool. Now, October 1975, I was 13. I was holidaying in Blackpool with the family, and we went to the Doctor Who exhibition on the Golden Mile, saw the exhibition, and then went into the shop, and there were these books I didn't know existed. And I think it was your first book, listening to the podcast, Doctor Who and the Cybermen.
That is right. I bought 3 in the same day, and that was also my first.
That was my first one, and it was Patrick Troughton, the second Doctor, my Doctor, and the Cybermen, my very favourite and among my first memories. Doctor Who and the Giant Robot was another one, and Doctor Who and the Abominable Snowmen. I got those 3 in the exhibition at Blackpool. But Doctor Who and the Cybermen, I just know that was the first one I read.
So you have 1 Jerry Davis and you have 2 of Terrence Dix's richest books. That's a very great introduction to the show right there, or at least to the books right there.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sure I got the original Dalek book fairly early. I hope the memory doesn't cheat. I'm sure the Giant Robot was one of them. But the Daleks was an early one. The Auton Invasion, as it was called, that would have been an early one as well. Yeah, I think at the time there were only about 9 or 10 books. I think it was Doctor Who and the Crusaders was another one. I didn't have a memory of William Hartnell, but I remember reading those books, featuring the First Doctor and being excited by, and Doctor Who and the Zarbi, aka the Web Planet. That was one that I remember fondly as well.
Yeah, there were the 3 Hartnell novelizations that came out in hardback in the 60s and then paperback in the States. And then those became the very first 3 Target books in 1973, if memory serves me right.
I'm sure it does.
So you would have been reading the originals right there at the beginning.
Right. Yeah. You're a proper historian. It's so interesting to talk to you. Yeah, and it is. It you make a connection back to the show. You make the Target books. Again, as I often say, there are episodes that I remember watching as a kid. And I have to say hello, Fraser, because I love the Dominators.
Oh, you have just made Fraser's year.
Because I remember watching it. I'm sorry. Hear me out. I was 6 or 7 years old, and I loved it. And I remember having a dream or a nightmare about the Quarks after it, and I love the Quarks. And I will never defend it as a great story, but it kicks off a chemical reaction in my brain. I remember watching it, and I had this dream or nightmare that featured the Quarks coming over a cliff top. And I couldn't believe when the VHS tape came out and I watched it, and there it was, the Quarks coming over a cliff top. And I remember having obviously watched it and then dreamt about it as a 6 or 7 year old. And I was so thrilled. And the Quarks as well. I've got a little Quark figure on the windowsill here. And they feature in comics that I read as well. TV comic, the Doctor Who comic strips. The Quarks were all over the place. And I love it. And I've got to say to Wendy Pabry and Fraser Hines and that how much as a kid, I loved that story because they did not enjoy it. They did not at all. They thought, oh my God, what's going on here? But I watched that and I lapped it up with a spoon, and I still love it. It's got the same cliffhanger every single episode, doesn't it? Quarks, destroy! And then Ron O'Reilly comes in and says, no quarks, don't destroy, stop. Spoilers. But I see a quark and I just go, quarks. Love it.
Fraser is going to have his year made by the fact that you and me are now both on Team Dominator.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I listened to that episode recently, and I was definitely on Team Fraser as well, I'll tell you.
Well, I was happy to put my point across and express how little that story means to me, but if you have a Doctor Who story...
Oh, you put it across.
But the larger point is he loves the story, you love the story. How am I going to argue with that? So I am quite happy to...
It's very positive, isn't it? It's very positive. And there are stories, there's not many, I'd say. There are stories, again, I remember watching that I didn't enjoy. And I've had that very happy journey of coming around to really like stories that I didn't enjoy in first broadcast. Like Underworld. When you see it in isolation, you think, actually, that's not a bad story. And I remember Nightmare of Eden. I missed episode 3, and I didn't mind missing it at all at the time. But I come back to Nightmare of Eden now, and I really enjoy it as a story. And in fact, my older daughter, as a kid, it was her very favourite story. She's about 7 or 8, so maybe she had the whole Dominators thing with that. But actually, it's a really good story. It's just not a great production. But a really good story, and quite cutting edge for Doctor Who, actually, and something I can relate to now. I mean, drug dealers and that sort of thing. Something in my other career, I dealt with that, and and it's obviously something that was close to Paul Baker's heart, because again, it's something he wrote he and Dave Martin wrote a very good script for a series called Taggart for Philip Hinchcliffe, called Big Elephant, about heroin dealers. Something I watched on transmission, didn't appreciate it too much, but it's nice. It's nice to make that journey, be far more positive about something. And I do really enjoy it now.
Nightmare is one of those stories that, had it been made a little bit earlier or a little bit later with a different budget and a different director, it would probably be in everybody's top 20. But unfortunately, the choice of director really didn't suit the... I know that I read the book first before the episode cycled around on my PBS station. And when I read the book, I was absolutely enthralled. And then when I finally got to the TV, my impression was, wait, that's all there is? This is not anything like the book at all. And then I learned about the troubled production turmoil behind the scenes, and that probably explains why the TV is so uneven.
Yeah, Graham had to step in, didn't he, on that one. And also the budgetary problems that season, and industrial action and everything else. Because, a great story, but the thing is, Doctor Who, and as a scriptwriter, I write stories, the other writers write stories, but Doctor Who tells stories, but Doctor Who is it's what it is mainly is a TV production, and that's a lot of talents coming together. And I think what happened in Nightmare of Eden was, again, probably largely budgetary, but also some other decisions that were made where I think, it wasn't a great production. It was a really good story, but let down possibly in a big way by budgetary concerns. I mean, I look at the customs agents in it, and the peaks of their caps look as if they've been cut out with kid scissors. They're just not rounded. Little things like that, and it just looks, they were running out of money perhaps, or whatever, I don't know. But a great story.
And some of the acting choices are all over the place. Nobody is on the same page as to whether or not this is a dark tragedy or a lighthearted farce.
Well, yes, and of course, interesting choice of accents in places.
Louis Fiander. Whereas your Doctor Who was directed by Peter Grimwade and scored by Peter Howell, so you could not have done better than you did in terms of the production lottery.
Yeah, it flattered everything on the page. I was very, very lucky. And Max Samet, who was the film cameraman on location as well, did such a good job. But Peter Grimwade as a director did a fabulous job. And then I was so lucky. I people like George Baker and Richard Willis. You know, George Baker and Richard Willis for me. I mean, I couldn't believe it when they were cast. Maybe not so well known in the States, but Richard had done a thing called The Feathered Serpent. And I recommend people hunt that down. It was a kids series, ran for 2 seasons. Aztec story with Patrick Troughton as a high priest, and quite written by John Kane, who was in Planet of Spiders.
Oh yes, Tommy.
And it's a brilliant series, and don't be put off by it being a kids series. If you watch it now, you think, gee, was that a kids series? Are people being tortured? You know, not very graphically as it would be now, but graphic for a kids series of the 70s. And Richard was so good, and George Baker, who'd been in I, Claudius, and very popular series here like Please Sir and the Fen Street Gang and Bowler, where he played a gangster character. Yeah. And in fact, I recently rediscovered a letter that he wrote to me after Full Circle, which was really nice.
Oh wow!
He's a lovely, lovely guy, and had a couple of chats with him where he's so encouraging and complimentary. But the whole cast were lovely, really.
There's a lot of British classic television that I have not seen, just being on the wrong side of the pond. But you have 2 actors from the James Bond classic, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, in your story. And George Baker actually does the voice of James Bond for a good half hour in the middle of the picture.
That's right, when he's undercover. Yeah. James Bree. Yeah.
Much smaller role, but he's definitely in it.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, they were just such a lovely group. I tended to hang out with Richard and Bernard and June and Matthew, you know, the Outlers. But George made the time to actually specifically, you know, I remember catching one time he was coming off the set and was walking up the steps and saw me and came over and had a lovely long chat. Yeah, he's such a nice guy. Yeah, good times, really nice, very happy memories.
We have a lot of ground that I want to cover today, but I figure the first thing I want to do is play with you a game of 20 questions, given your enthusiasm for the format.
Here we go.
So I am going to load up the randomizer. I have no idea what I'm going to get between 1963 and 2022. Smudge is trying to bite me as I hit the keyboard, but I will do the best that I can at risk to personal harm. All right, here we go. The story has been loaded. This has been randomly picked, not pre-selected. I just learned the identity of the story 10 seconds ago. I am one random Doctor Who story beginning in 1963 with 20 yes or no questions. Andrew Smith. Who am I?
Right. I was very tempted to go for the Hail Mary on this, but I'm not doing it. What I have done, I have a piece of paper here on which I have written down the name of a story, and I'm tempted to go for it. I'm not going to go for it, but if that is it, I shall be so disappointed in myself. Okay. Is it a David Tennant story?
It is not a David Tennant story. Question 2.
Right, we can rip up the family of blood then. Right. Is it a black and white story?
It is not a black and white story. So we've now eliminated the 1960s and a chunk of the 2000s. Question 3.
Is it a 20th century story?
Yes, it is a 20th century story, and that is your first yes response. That brings us to question 4.
Question 4, then. Is it a Fourth Doctor story?
That's a terrific use of the fourth question. And by the way, yes, it is a Fourth Doctor story. Question 5.
Right, we've narrowed it down. Right, is the companion Leela?
No, it is not a Leela
Right.
story. Now, I just assumed that you were going to do what David Barsky did last month and go immediately to Full Circle as your first guess, but you have definitely taken the unpredictable route. So I think we're at question 6 now. We now have, I think, 5.5 out of Tom Baker's 7 seasons on the table.
Is it a Philip Hinchcliffe?
It is. It is a Philip Hinchcliffe story.
Right.
Question 7.
How to play this now?
Now we're down to 3 years. 3 years out of 60.
Yeah. I've eliminated just a few episodes.
I think it's 2.5 seasons because Leela was the back half of season 14. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is it season 13?
Ooh, I wish it was. Season 13 has some all-time bangers, but it is not season 13. So now we are at question number 8.
Is it Tom Baker's first season?
Yes, it is Tom Baker's first season.
Right.
So now you have guaranteed a win because we are at question 9 and there are more questions remaining than stories available to choose from.
Right.
The question is, are you going to get it in 10 questions or less?
Is it set on Nerva Beacon?
Yes, it is set on Nerva Beacon. So now we've narrowed it down to 2 stories.
Because I remember how excited I was to hear the announcer at the end of Genesis of the Daleks, and I was very excited. Is it Revenge of the Cybermen?
Revenge of the Cybermen was the source of my very first VCR malfunction. We had gone away for the weekend, and I set my VCR to tape the back 3 episodes, and I came home, watched part 2, watched part 3, desperate to watch part 4, and the tape cut out, and it was years before I saw it again, which is a long way of saying that no, it is not Revenge of the Cybermen.
The Ark in Space.
It is the Ark in Space. I think that was question 12, which is that's a good middle of the pack performance. That's about as well as I did the one time that I played the game.
You flatter me, sir. No, it's not. It does take me back. I'd say I do. I think one of the most exciting times of my Doctor Who watching was at the end of Genesis of the Daleks, when the announcer said Doctor Who will return next week in The Revenge of the Cybermen. Because I was 10. Might have been 9 actually. But, yeah. It's Cybermen, among my very first memories. That's very exciting.
Now, in your very long career as a Big Finish writer, have you had the opportunity to write for the Cybermen?
Yes, I have. I was asked to write a story for the 6th Doctor featuring the 80s Cybermen with David Banks as a cyber leader. And in fact, it's one of my happiest writing jobs. I really, really enjoyed it. I loved the end product. It's called The Hour of the Cybermen. And I'm very pleased with that one. Very pleased with that one.
So I do have to ask, given your fondness for revenge, even though you're writing for the 80s Cybermen and not for Christopher Robbie, did you have the ability or the desire to work in any revenge quotes into Hour?
No. No, I don't. No, there was not. I do remember I got to, I think I'd written 2.5 episodes and I realised I didn't have the cyber leader saying, excellent. Obviously, that's very 80s, so I went back and I put that in. But I did notice something. In fact, it's one of my favourite lines, actually, that, and it's going back to, again, it happens quite a bit in Earthshock. It happens in the Five Doctors as well. The Cybermen are shot and they scream. And so I had this line in Hour of the Cybermen where Cyberman is shot and he screams. And the character says, they may have no emotions, but you notice they scream as they die. Which, again, one of my favourite lines. But it's something that struck me. Yeah, no emotions, but my God, they show emotion when they get shot. But I'm just trying to think, because I've done quite a few now. Yeah, I think that's the only... I've done a few Dalek stories. But that's the only Cyberman story I think I've done. But I was really, really pleased to be asked to do that.
The first of your big finishes that I heard was the Vord story with William Russell and Carol Ann Ford. So you and Philip Hinchcliffe, who have both been on this show, you have both written for the Vord, because Philip, of course, did the novelization for Keys of Marinus. So how did that come about? How did you wind up writing a Vord / First Doctor adventure?
I was asked to do it. I think it was a third or fourth thing I'd done for Big Finish. And David Richardson, the producer, just got in touch and said, we're doing this new range. We'd like you to do the opening story. If you could do the Vord. And there was a particular thing he wanted, because we had Carol and William were our main cast in that. And I had the director, it was to feature the Vord. And also he wanted Ian and Susan to think that the Doctor and Barbara were dead, hopelessly dead by the end of episode 2, and they start to leave in the TARDIS. Apart from that, do what I wanted to do, and so I researched it and came up with that story, and it's one of my favourites. And Carol's been very complimentary about it, and in fact, I am today writing something more related to the Vord.
Oh my goodness!
So oddly enough that you mention it, but yeah, I can't say any more than that. But yeah, I'm Vording again on a certain thing, which is a great pleasure.
So not only did you get to write for George Baker and James Bree and Richard Willis with season 18, but you've written for a terrific range of Doctor Who All-Stars with Big Finish, because I believe your Full Circle sequel had Gemma Redgrave in it.
Yes, that was the very first thing she did for Big Finish, and it was all because we were getting ready for the studio, and David Richardson, again the producer, sent me an email, and it had the cast list attached to it, and I just thought, that's odd. I don't usually get the cast list, but then I looked and I saw our main decider was being played by Gemma, which was a lovely, lovely bit of news and a lovely surprise. And I've worked with her quite a bit now, because I've written for, and I've written quite a few Unit Nemesis stories for Big Finish, but also script edited the 4 Unit Nemesis box sets that she was in. So, and in fact, bumped into John Donnie, and I bumped into her on the Trump demo in London the last time that Trump came to London.
Oh.
Happened to find ourselves alongside each other there. Oh, hello.
Yeah, my latest script. I'm right now in the middle of writing my script for Frontios, which will be episode 91. And I could not help but mention him in the script. I think there's an unfortunate number of episodes of this podcast where I have to refer to him one way or the other. And Frontios will be another one.
Yeah. I'm reading Frontios. Again, getting back into... I thought I had it here, actually. But, yeah, getting back into the books. Oh, here we are. Yes.
Matching copies.
Snap. We are both holding up Frontios. There we go.
Mine still has the original B. Dalton Books price sticker from when I purchased this in 1985 or 86.
Right. I yeah, I love Chris's writing. And Frontios, yeah, is my favourite Peter Davison serial. And I love your episodes on Legopolis and Castrovalva. I think Castrovalva is exceptional. I mean, years ago, I remember I was a surveillance officer in counter-terrorism for a number of years. I went through a lot of audiobooks sitting around plots. And I remember getting the CDs of, in fact, no, it might even have been a tape of Chris's Castrovalva audio book. And the book really adds something to it, especially when we get to the Castrovalva element, because it is very much a serial of two halves. And the whole Castrovalva setup is exceptional. It's so engaging. It's so compelling. The antagonist is the master, but apart from that, you feel such empathy and sympathy for the Castrovalvans and these circumstances, and again that lovely reveal where the doctor can't work it out what's wrong with these books, and Shadavan said, "Yeah, the books are old." And it's a great reveal. The books are old, but they tell the history of Castrovalva up to the present day, which is a glorious reveal. But the whole way that Chris tells the story is, it's really exceptional and original, and something very different in Doctor Who. Love it, love it, love it.
And I mentioned this in my Castrovalva episode as well, but there's the line in the book when the Doctor is examining the Chronicles of Castrovalva. And the line that Chris writes in the novelization is the Doctor had concluded that experience was no substitute for books, which basically is my entire childhood is encapsulated in that one line.
Brilliant.
And there's a lot of good stuff in Frontios as well, which I'll cover when that episode comes out.
Yeah, one thing, I've got two daughters, and now getting one's 17, one's 20, and they both love the book. I mean, my 17-year-old Jenny, I mean, she just devours books, goes through one after another. Although she did when she was about 10, I was sat in this very chair working away, and she came in and she had I think the Full Circle novelization was on one side, or she'd looked at it and she picked it up, and she said, "Did you write this then?" And she's flicking. I've got it. She's flicking it. "Did you write this then?" I said, "Yes, honey, I did."
Wow.
And she went through a few pages. What? Every word? Yes, sweetheart. Yes, I did. And then she was like, "Well, all of it?" Yes. I wrote every word. And then for a 10-year-old, she comes out with this question. She said, "Did you have an editor?" Yes. But I wrote every word. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Couldn't quite get her head around the fact that, so many pages, so many words that I'd written them. Yeah.
My 13-year-old was a guest on the show a couple of months ago for the Enlightenment episode.
I know, for Enlightenment. Cassie.
Callie, yes.
Callie. Sorry, Callie. Yeah.
She read the entire book inside of 2 hours. I have not persuaded her to read a second one yet, but maybe I'll find a way to do it for the program.
Wow. Now, God, that is that's quick reading. Yeah.
Also, she devours books at frightening speed sometimes, but the comprehension is incredible. So these days, I can't read anything in 2 hours. It takes me 4 days to read a novel because I break it up into episode parts and I go in small chunks.
Well, I've done in my old job. I did a speed reading course actually, which reads, but of course, the faster you read, generally the comprehension goes down. And there are some things you don't need to comprehend too much if you're reading the book, you want to. But that's impressive. She can do that. I just got the season 20 Blu-ray arrived today through the post, and Enlightenment's on that obviously, and I love that. I love that serial. And there's I've noticed looking at the book, there's an interview with Barbara Clegg.
Ooh.
I don't know if that's been out before, but I'm really, really looking forward to that. That's quite an exceptional story.
I ordered the UK release of the season 20 box set. Has not come to the States yet. I imagine it's en route, but I'll be covering that over on the Trap One podcast because season 20 is where I came in as a fan, basically. So I have tremendously fond memories of all those stories.
I've had people. I tell you what, my first definite memory of Doctor Who is the Yeti in the Underground, in the Web of Fear. Now I remember the Cybermen well, but I don't know. They're in a few stories, so I don't know. I mean, I do remember the invasion, but maybe I've got memories of earlier Cybermen. But I've had people say to me their very first memories of Doctor Who are the Marshmen coming out of the marsh, which just makes me feel very, very old. So I think, God, my first memories are black and white, and I just assume everyone's is, But yeah. But it's nice. It's really nice when people say that.
What was it like for you in 2013 when Web of Fear was discovered and re-aired for the first time in almost 50 years?
Oh, it was beautiful. I mean, I'd heard there were, some episodes were about to be announced, and I remember thinking I couldn't be that lucky that it's a Web of Fear, because I do so remember it, and I remember being scared by it. I remember watching the Yeti in the Underground, and when they said that was one of the stories, I was like, wow, And again, just that chemical reaction like the Dominators were, and it was great to watch. It's great to watch and just think, yeah, I actually sat down and as a very, very young kid and watched this, and now I'm watching it again. Along with Enemy of the World, which I had no memory of, but what a great story that is.
Yeah, it was a revelation how good Enemy of the World was. So that was a very exciting discovery. Hopefully there are more discoveries coming, but it's been now 10 years since the last missing episode got returned. So
yeah, there are always rumours. And it's funny with Enemy of the World, because I run quite a bit, and I listen to audiobooks and I run. And I was on holiday in the north of Scotland. I was running, and I was listening to the soundtrack of Enemy of the World, and I listened to it, and I loved it. And I tweeted about it, and I had so much come back at me about how bad it was. And I thought, but just the audio. I mean, without seeing, and it's enhanced absolutely by the direction. It's a great looking serial. I just thought the story was really good, and I couldn't really understand it. Maybe the fact there was just that one episode, which is not the best of the episodes that was available at that time. Maybe that, but no, it was really good when that serial came back and was so well regarded.
when you're talking about a show that we have been watching as fans for literally decades, I'm coming up on my 40th anniversary of a fan, and you've already passed that. There's just no value for me in being hypercritical of old stories that were made in a different age by a production crew that has largely passed on. Now, I will make comical digs at a story like The Dominators just for the sake of a good running gag, and I'm very happy to give equal time to you and to Fraser, who fondly remember The Dominators, but I don't understand the need to do a hate watch of Doctor Who 40, 50, 60 years later. These stories are finished. There's either you enjoy them or you find another show to watch. So for somebody to take time out of their day to criticize Enemy of the World now just boggles the imagination. What are you doing with your life when that's the high point of your day? Criticizing a story that old and from a long bygone era.
I mean, everyone's entitled to say, I'll watch something and I didn't enjoy it, or you don't take something out of it. I mean, Inferno, funny, no, just led to you. I've just listened to you and Dave talking about Inferno, and I'm not going to hate on it, but I've never understood the appreciation for that. It doesn't trigger with me. I don't hate it. But I just friends like Stephen and Chris and Warren and the guys in the writers' room, Radio Free Scar and the guys in the writers' room. I remember at the same time they both did episodes gushing about Inferno, and I thought I'll give it another go and I watch it, and But why did the Primords form? What is this gunk that comes out of the ground? Why is Liz a military figure in the other one? Why is she there? She's a military figure, not a scientist. Things like that go off my head. And it doesn't. I don't really dislike it. I don't. And I've approached it very positively. I'm missing something here, and I watch it again, and it just doesn't trigger things for me. I don't think, I don't want to watch it. I don't think, I really don't like this. But yeah. But again, people will watch Full Circle, or they'll watch anything, and there'll be people who go, yeah. But I'm trying to say, for me mostly things are, I remember watching Invisible Enemy at the time, and the episode where they go in the Doctor's brain, thinking, what the hell's going on here? This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. But it's fun. Underworld I've learned to reappreciate, because again at the time, people think now, at the time that would have been fine, all this CSO. No, it wasn't. Let me tell you. But no, it wasn't okay at the time. But actually, last time I watched Underworld, I really enjoyed it. And in fact, I'm just doing a rewatch of, continuing a rewatch, and I was watching The Sunmakers today, so Underworld is next up. So who knows what I'll think next time around, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've had Louis Baston on the show a couple of times, and he did the Black Archive on Sunmakers. That is his absolute favorite. I'm very fond of it too.
I love it.
I'll just say my 3 quick points in favor of Inferno. Number 1, it's at that point, for the first 7 years of the show, it's the most carefully written script, because every line of dialogue in part 1 specifically prefigures some future plot development. So it's next level writing that you weren't getting, certainly during weaker stories.
Now I'm going to revisit it because you said that on the episode. That's really interesting, and I'm going to I can't just say as well. I just thought, listen to you and Dave, I can't get my head around it. It's such a British show, this. When I hear people from other parts of the world, and Dave being the TV guy, whatever as well, and just talking about his love for the towns of Wang Chiang, and just dropping names, and again that Americans can just do this. What story am I? And just at their fingertips, they've got episode titles, and just, is it this? Is it that? Oh, it's Dragonfire. Okay, And I'm just blown away by it, because I just think it's such a British thing. But I love it. I've been to one American convention, Galley, and I've just absolutely gobsmacked at the level of love for the show, and by people who are just so far away for a thing you'd think is just so very, very British. It's great. It's great.
I am at Galley almost every year.
Yeah.
I've known Barsky for almost a decade now, and he's become a huge part of this show. Sitting in his house in Los Angeles and looking at his 2,800 book library of movie and TV sci-fi nonfiction, one of my favorite days. I want to spend a lot more time in that library for sure. He's got just a whole cabinet of Doctor Who reference books. That's only a small fraction of his collection. He has everything.
I remember you saying, if you just retired and that was your job to keep reading, you could just keep reading and reading and reading in that room.
Yes, I mean, I'd have a lot of competition from him. We'd have to coordinate the hours, but...
Yeah. And try and keep hiding that machine from his wife. The fortune-telling machine you were talking about.
So what was the year that you were at Galley?
2013. Yeah, 10 years ago. Over 10 years ago. It was the 50th anniversary. God, it doesn't feel that long ago.
Yeah, that was the year that tickets sold out for fan attendees in about 45 minutes, and I was on a conference call for work, and by the time I got off, it was too late. That was the last Galley that I missed intentionally. Or unintentionally, I should say. And
I very nearly didn't go. I was in counter-terrorism and policing at the time, and I had to do this... I was given this job of doing a national review of counterterrorism policing, basically, and I very nearly didn't go. What I had to do was just basically not have very late nights and then come back and then get back as quickly as I could the next week and get to hit the ground and straight on traveling the UK doing this review. So I very nearly didn't go, but it also meant I couldn't really completely get into it because I had to have early nights and what have you. But it was a real experience. It was, and people were so friendly, so welcoming, and I think there was something like 3,000 people there.
Yes, that was one of the biggest ones.
Yeah. Oh, very, very impressive. And you got an impressive one with you because you're in Long Island, aren't you? So you got Eli who?
Yes, I'm in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is
All right.
geographically Long Island, although it's considered New York City and not Long Island politically. So it's about a 60-mile drive to Elihu, but I go every year because it's so close by. You can't not go.
60 miles, so close by. Yeah, a bit different. Well, I'm in Surrey. I mean, for me to get to the centre of London from here, I mean, I'm just in Surrey. I say a bit I'm in London. Where I live, I'm about 1 mile away from the London border.
Oh, wow.
But it's 16 miles to like the Houses of Parliament at Big Ben and that. So, by your terms, I walk down the street really. Yeah.
So being in New York City. I live a 4-minute walk from the nearest subway station, so I could be at the most important parts of Manhattan within 20 to 45 minutes, depending on where I'm going.
Right.
The Elihu drive is a lot longer because there's always traffic, no matter what time of day or night. The Long Island Expressway is always choked full of cars, but I just plug an audiobook or a podcast onto my car stereo, and the time goes by pretty quick.
Yeah, it's good to do. And having the audiobooks.
I listened to the Marco Polo novelization one year. That was a fun drive.
See, I've not read that one. I need to rediscover. I need to go and discover some of the earlier. But I haven't. I've started listening to the Highlanders episode today, which has just dropped, and I'm very interested to hear the rest of it. You and Dan. It's Daniel, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I've been to the Culloden battle site a couple of times, but earlier this year I was there. Actually, didn't realise, but it was the day before the anniversary.
Oh wow!
And it's a really interesting place to go. And Culloden. The Battle of Culloden is actually there's probably a way of telling that story another way in Doctor Who. I was thinking about it today actually while I was listening. That is there some way to kind of tell that story in more detail? Jamie before the battle. I was trying to think it might be a way around that because it is very interesting because the Bonnie Prince Charlie's forces really made. You might talk about this in the episode, but they made some real tactical errors. They did a night march to Nairn to try and surprise the government forces. They're not even English forces because there's a lot of Scots on the government side, and then marched back, and they were absolutely exhausted the next day. And they should have retreated to Inverness, and they didn't. And then they advanced through marshland up an incline, and that's all clear when you go to the battlefield. Anyway, I'm going on about something here, but yes, I'm very interested to listen to that episode, which people listening to this will have heard by now, so I'll stop talking.
Well, we played 20 questions earlier, and my understanding is that you have decided to turn the tables, and you have a game for me.
I do. So I have. Right. Now I'm going to try and lift these down without you seeing them.
I see nothing.
Actually, I'm going to call in a substitute now because... right. Let me bring in a substitute. Because one of them... so this isn't part of the quiz. Is going to be at assigned... Right. So the quiz is... I'll read out the opening line or 2 or 3 lines from a Target novelization and see if you can recognize them. The one I was going to do, but I won't know for obvious reasons, it began, at a sign from Captain Revere, the diggers put up their picks and stood as still as the shadows on the chill rock walls. Which It's what you're reading at the minute. It's Francios, of course.
He said nothing as he knelt to collect more of the rock samples. He had been silent for days now, leaving it to Brazen, his second in command, to give the few necessary orders.
There we are.
Yeah, when I have the book at my fingertips, that is probably not the best choice.
Right. Okay, I'm going to break you. Okay, I've got 5 here. So I'm going to break you in gently. Through the ruin of a city stalked the ruin of a man.
One of the most famous first lines in Terrence Dix's entire library. I was fortunate to have Target writer John Peel on the show to discuss that one a couple of years ago. That is Doctor Who and the Dalek Invasion of Earth.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And number 2. The hot January sun beat out of the cloudless blue sky, and a warm northeast wind blew the coral sea into a roaring froth over the Great Barrier Reef.
The only place where the January sun is hot is below the equator, and the Great Barrier Reef is Australia. And that was the book that I recorded live at Galley this past February, 6 months ago. So that is going to have to be Doctor Who and the Enemy of the World by Ian Marter.
Ta-da! Yes, it is. Absolutely. And the next one. Here we go. The long, low room housed 3 separate rows of control consoles and technicians and resembled Cape Kennedy tracking station in miniature. At one end, the interior of a space capsule had been projected onto a large screen. 2 astronauts were seated at the capsule controls.
My very first Doctor Who convention was in Manhattan at the now defunct Roosevelt Hotel in 1985. And my father took me very reluctantly, and we spent most of our day in the dealer's room until the events started, and I attended a screening of Dalek Invasion of Earth before the American syndication package. And the book that you are describing, I purchased that afternoon in the dealer's room and spent a lot of time reading in the hotel lobby in between events. That would have to be Jerry Davis, Doctor Who and the 10th Planet.
Ta-da! Yes, it is.
The emotional rush that I get from seeing that cover is just as great as the emotional rush that I got from seeing that cover in the dealer's room in 1985.
And I remember when I got this, I got such a rush being able to read that first story. Copyright 1976. Wow. Yeah. So I was 14-ish. Right. How many is that? That's 3. I've got 3. Okay. Right. Okay. Chris. Here we go. Right. Next one. Chris was dying. Painfully, he dragged his insect-like body away from the blazing ruins of the shattered spaceship. Only a powerful survival instinct kept him alive and moving. 2 of his legs were broken, and he scrabbled painfully across the razor-sharp rocks with the remaining 4.
See, that throws me off, because when you say Chris, that's very close to the character that Conrad played for Big Finish.
Keriz.
But it is not a Big Finish novelization. I will tell you exactly why I bought that book. When I watched Brain of Morbius on TV for the first time at age 11, Philip Madoc keeps saying the word laboratory. I'm like, what word is that? I've never heard of that word before. So I ran to the bookstore to figure out, what is this word that I don't know? Turns out it's laboratory, but it's the British pronunciation. So it is Doctor Who and the Brain of Morbius.
Laboratory.
Yes.
Oh, speaking of pronunciation, by the way, it's the Leisure Hive.
I'm sure it is, and bless your heart, but here in the States, it is the Leisure Hive.
Yes. Right, I've got 2 left. Let me go for... Well, I'll give you them both, so make it 6. Right, okay, next one. Luigi Rossini came down the steps of his caravan and looked about him with satisfaction. Most people wouldn't have seen much cause for pleasure. A tatty little circus setting up in a muddy field. But Luigi Rossini, who had been born Lou Ross in Hoxton 50 years ago, saw things differently.
is there any better moment when you're watching Doctor Who in order than seeing Roger Delgado jump athletically out of the back of the horse box, down to the ground, and then marching up and hypnotizing Lou Russell? That has to be Doctor Who and the Terror of the Autons.
Of course it is. Yes.
My copy is autographed by Terrence Dix himself, the one time that I met him, Li Who 2014.
Brilliant. Right. Okay. Now this one, I want you to identify and tell me what is so special about this one in terms of target publication. I don't expect to be flummoxed by this at all. But anyway, main thing. Here's the opening. Chapter 1. Space Station J7 defied all sense of what was structurally possible. Its Arquetineers, reveling in the freedom of zero gravity, had created an ethereal tracery of loops and whorls and cusps that formed a constantly changing pattern as the station rotated slowly upon its axis.
I think that is the only book out of the 6 which has not yet been covered on Doctor Who literature. And that means I have not read it in a long time, but Space Station J7 is triggering specific memories of target book number 100, the only book written in full by the great Robert Holmes. That would have to be Doctor Who, The Two Doctors.
6 out of 6. Make it 7 out of 7 with a bonus. The 100th Doctor Who novel.
That was filmed in Spain in August 1985. It was filmed in August 84, exactly a year before my trip to Spain. So I just missed seeing the Doctor Who production crew by 1 year. We were in Seville as part of our bus tour, walking through some of those same streets.
Yeah, because I don't need to tell you the prologue for the Time War is actually written by Robert Holmes, because he got that far and said, nah, I'm not really getting on with prose. Terence, can you do it?
When you get to that episode in my back catalog, Conrad does a reading of a portion of the prologue. It's one of the best things that I've ever listened to.
Oh, I must. I must put that one high up the list, actually. And can I just say, I love Jim's musical interludes and these little skits. And the song, the shanty song he did, Enlightenment, I loved it to bits. It's oh god, yeah. You you've really lucked out having Jim on board.
And there's a YouTube video for that too. Yeah. No, Jim has done so much for the show. He has recorded a lot of songs for episodes that aren't coming out for months, but he is amped and he is ready to go.
Yeah, he's such a lovely guy. Because I'd known of Jim for years, and then we just met at this party in London a couple of months ago now. And what a lovely, lovely guy. Jim, I know you'll be listening. Hello again. See you soon, I hope. Oh, let's have another drink. It's a fantastic company. It's really, really lovely to meet him. And yeah, he's the reason, I've discovered the podcast. And I absolutely love it. It's been a real pleasure. It's kept me company on most of my runs recently. And you've done a great job. And I was thinking of, because I'm going to be moving out maybe in the next year or two. I was, already thinking maybe clearing some things out and saying, well, I haven't read the Target books in a while, maybe I'll offload them. But no way now. I'm going to start working my way through them again. Well, I've already made a start on it. Yeah. Thank you very much.
So glad to hear that. Thank you. Now, you were showing me some goodies before we started recording,
Yes.
so I want to wrap up this episode through a guided tour of your collection. The first thing that you showed me, which I am still flabbergasted by, is you have a foreign language novelization, which in its translated tongue has some rather chilling word choices.
Yeah, so in January of 1992, I went on a ski holiday to Austria, to a place called Zellamsee, and at a shop there, I found this book called, written by one Terence Dix, called Doctor Who und der Planet der Daleks. And it's the German language version of Doctor Who, and you'll never guess, the Planet of the Daleks. And I can always remember the opening line, Der große weißhaarige Mann lag so still als war tot. The tall white-haired man lay as still as death. But looking at if I can find it, looking at the language that's used, so in the original English, I'll just find it and bear with me because I'm nearly there. So at the Dalek control room, stand by, and of course now I can't find it. Right, so the original English, in the central control area, the Dalek commander, military leader of the expedition to Spyridon, was listening to the report of his second in command. That's on page 42. And then on page 41 of the German version, it's im zentralen Kontrollraum hörte der Dalek-Kommandant den militärische Expeditionsführer nach Spyridon den Bericht seines zweiten Befehlshabenden zu. And so you got, Dalek Kommandant, militärische Expeditionsführer nach Spyridon den Bericht seines zweiten Befehlshabenden zu. Again, words that again we're kind of more used to hearing in the context of like an Alistair MacLean, well, any kind of I would say war story, but the Commandant, Führer, and yes, in German language later on we get the German the Dalek German language version of this says Alarm, Alarm, Alarm. Fremde werden von falschem Dalek begleitet. Sofort suchen und exterminieren.
Ooh, wow.
Hunt them down and exterminate. So yes, the extermineering that appeared in the... Which story was it? It wasn't Sontaran Stratagem, was it? It was someone, with Martha, and they were in Germany. Going exterminating. Terrible, isn't it? You get in the 21st century and it all gets a little foggy at times. But yeah, it's a nice nice little artifact to have. I was very pleased to get it. I did learn German at school. I've got some passing German, and it's but it's still der Dalek Verfolger war jetzt schon sehr. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's kind of outside my German vocabulary, really.
I do not collect any of the foreign language versions because I would not be able to read them. But for my 50th birthday, Graham Burke of the Reality Bomb podcast just gave me the American paperback 1967 edition of Doctor Who in an Exciting Adventure with the Daleks, which has this phenomenal, I'll show it to you, cover art because it's a bold red and blue cover scheme.
Uh-huh.
And it appears to be miniature toy Daleks on a photo collage cover.
Right.
Now, I already have a copy of Doctor Who and the Daleks.
Is this the advanced 50th birthday present?
Well, my 50th birthday party was last week, and the actual birthday is coming up next month.
Yeah, I remember you said it in advance. Congratulations in advance, by the way. Happy birthday when it comes.
Yeah, the actual birthday is the day after my kid's bat mitzvah, and I am not stealing her thunder by having two parties in the same weekend, so I moved my 50th to accommodate her.
Wow.
So the drop shadow on the font makes up for the fact that there's no Doctor Who logo.
Yeah.
And then it appears to be toy Daleks in the...
How bizarre.
And it's the same text. It's the same text, although they've changed the quotation marks to American style. But otherwise, you can see.
Right. Yeah. The Lake of Mutations. Yeah.
And then there's an advertisement for another paperback book line on the back of the paperback, which you don't see a lot of with the original targets. Cross-pollinated ads.
Oh, well, that's lovely, Graham. Yeah, and I've heard him on your show, and again, Reality Bomb I love as well, and the gallery of the underrated and what have you. But always good to listen to Graham, and that's a lovely present.
Oh, I was just delighted. Yeah, I was on Gallery of the Underrated many years ago to talk about the Crotons. I enjoy the Crotons as much as you and Fraser enjoy the Dominators. So I'm always happy to talk about the Crotons.
Yeah.
Which is coming up very soon on this show.
Right.
So The other things that you showed me before we started recording are a couple of thick envelopes that make me want to reach through the screen and grab and examine. What do you have there?
This was really odd. As I explained, I went up into the loft because I thought, right, I had the idea to do this thing of like the target books, do the opening quotations and see what you thought. And next to that was a box with some like scripts and things, a couple of envelopes, and one of which had the contract for the Full Circle novelisation, which I did not know I had. And it's about 7 or 8 pages, and I was looking for dates on it. What it's the interesting thing is, as my memory was, I've been asked to deliver a 40,000 word manuscript. The contract actually says a manuscript of no more than 40,000 words and no less than 30,000.
Huh.
So if I'd chosen to, I could have delivered 75% of what I actually did. In fact, I think I'd overwritten because I discovered from a note attached to the audiobook when it came out, actually, from David J. Howe, who'd done the excellent The Target book, which I've got an overview of all the Target novelizations, was that I hadn't realized, but actually the font size was reduced when Full Circle was published in order to fit it into 120 pages. So I suspect I did more than 40,000, but that surprised me. So again, one of the things at the time is I think up to that point, the books were becoming, and I know you've done a few now where you commented on it, the books were becoming a little thin and a bit slight. And I remember I love Talons of Weng-Chiang, but I got the novelization, and I was I remember being at the time a little disappointed how slim it was for a 6-part story. But in terms of the contract, you could deliver a relatively low word count. And the other thing, which I haven't even properly looked at yet, here it is. It is a draft of the Full Circle novelization, and I haven't had this out for, years. It's the novelization manuscript from chapter 3 onwards.
Wow.
And there's a contract.
Oh my goodness.
And it's got my handwritten notes on it, which I need to look through because I haven't looked at these in years. Mostly I think it's just because, again, this is obviously written on a typewriter, and we didn't have copy and paste or cut and paste at the time. You just went through, you made notes, and then you wrote it out again, longhand. And just changes of phrases, and there's a whole new section written at the bottom of the page there.
Oh wow!
Just showing up, so I can see what the original was. Logan had watched with distaste as the Doctor had produced from the pouch in his pocket there. God, dreadful writing. The remains of the spider from the cave. So that was not the original draft. It's something I decided, having read the first draft, to amend. So this is, I think most pages have got changes I've written for myself. Yeah. I'm quite interested to read through that myself, actually. That's been shut away for years and years and years. But there you are. This is...
Oh, Doctor Who publishing agreement. It's got the logo on it, the show logo on the contract. That's terrific.
Yeah. And it's about, actually more pages than I thought. It's supposed to be about a dozen pages. And all sorts of counting legal talk and advance and royalties and specifications. Here we are. The work shall contain not more than 40,000 words and not less than 30,000 words. Should the work exceed the agreed length, the publisher shall be free to make such cuts as it shall consider to be necessary. The author shall deliver 2 legible copies of the completed typed manuscript of the work to the publisher on or before 31st of January 1982. Yeah. Like I say, I only rediscovered this half an hour before we started talking, so that's fine. Yeah, but that's that would have remained up there, and I wouldn't have known it was there. otherwise.
I have heard that when you submitted the manuscript, there was an epilogue showing the Starliner crash landing on another planet, and then the whole cycle begins anew. And the story goes that John Nathan Turner would not allow that to be published because it changes the televised story. So is that true, and do you have that epilogue, and how long was it?
It is true. He might decide to cut it because it was rubbish. You may be quite right doing that bit. Now, right, the last page I've got here doesn't include it. No. No, whatever lay ahead, the last words are, whatever lay ahead for the Doctor, Man and K9 in E-Space or beyond, Adric was now very much a part of it. So that's, so that is very much what's in the novelisation. But I do have a memory of doing that and getting the note that, no, we're going to cut that. But yeah. It might have been he thought it's not consistent with this. I just thought it's absolute pants, which he may have been correct. Yeah, I didn't have any major complaint with that. It was a little flourish, but I was very, very, very pleased to write the novelisation. I was actually initially approached for Terence to write it, and I said, no, I'd like to do it myself, please. And I was very pleased with it.
I'll ask one last question. The poem that appears in the book, which Jim Sangster did a phenomenal job narrating with a musical accompaniment, had you written that poem for the TV script and then used a fragment of the poem in the script itself? Or was that written in full for the novelization?
It was written for the novelization, and I was particularly keen to get some mention of the planet that has slept.
That's right.
Awakes, unleashing terror, bringing death. Did you forget? The title became full circle very late in the day, and it wasn't my choice. And if I wasn't really happy with it, I thought the planet that slept, which was the original title, I thought was much more impactful. And in fact, if you go on the season 18 Blu-ray and you download the documents, the scripts on there are all called The Planet That Slept. The Meglos scripts are also called The Last Sol Fathurin
right.
on the Blu-ray. The State of Decay scripts are all called The Wasting, because again, all of those had the titles changed fairly late in the day. So no, the poem was written for the novelization. There you go.
Well, Andrew, I cannot thank you enough for listening to my show and spreading the word and agreeing to talk to me. I'm going to schedule you to come back for an upcoming book, which is to be determined.
I'd love to.
But I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your evening and sharing your memories with us. And you did not stump me on the quiz, but maybe next time you will.
I doubt it very, very much. I'll see if I can improve on the 20 questions next time. But Jason, thanks for a lovely podcast. Thanks to all your guests as well. I just love every episode I've listened to, and the guests are so diverse as well, and they bring such passion and such engagement with the novels and such interesting viewpoints and some that I've known before, like Graham. I've heard elsewhere. It's lovely to hear Conrad, actually. I knew so well as Keres. Conrad, lovely to listen to. And Fraser standing up for the Dominators and some of the others. And Dave Barsky, I could listen to him forever. Everyone, and then I could just go on. And Jim, he brings so much to it as well. And Jim, thank you once again for letting me know about the podcast. Thanks very much.
All those guests are coming back very soon. I'm recording with David again next week for an upcoming season 21 novelization, and I look forward to you hearing it.
I look forward to listening.
And my thanks again to Andrew Smith for joining me in a conversation recorded in mid-September 2023. Andrew is definitely going to be back on the show at least one more time before the podcast reaches its natural end with the conclusion of the Target books. Hopefully more than that. Andrew, thank you again, buddy. Next week on Doctor Who Literature, we are rejoining Season 21, already in progress. Coming back to the show is co-producer David Barsky, who you've heard Andrew Smith say such nice things about. David and I have recorded a conversation, bi-coastal this time, New York to LA, no longer in the same room. David in his phenomenal library, and me at home in Brooklyn, talking about a story over which we both have very strong feelings. The penultimate Peter Davison story, the third to last story of Season 21, Peter Grimwade's final Doctor Who novelization based on his final Doctor Who TV script, but not his final book, as we will also discuss. It is a story that writes out several Doctor Who companions following the loss of Tegan in a novelization that has not come out yet, and following the loss of the TARDIS hat stand in the Frontios novelization. We are going to say goodbye to two more companions, but we are going to say hello to Doctor Who, Planet of Fire. Thank you for joining me on a bonus episode of the Doctor Who Literature Podcast. This podcast is produced by David Barsky, Jim Sangster, and yours truly. Special thanks to my special guest, Andrew Smith. Our logo was designed by Jim Sangster. This podcast can be found on most of your podcast apps of choice. You can find all past episodes at podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/Doctor Who Lit. It really helps if you rate 5 stars and subscribe. You can find me on Twitter at Doctor Who Novels, that's Dr. Who Novels, on Mastodon at Dr. Who Novels at mastodon.social, and on email at Doctor Who Literature, that's drwholiterature@gmail.com. Please drop me a line with your comments, questions, and suggestions. Thank you for listening, and whatever you do, keep turning the pages.
Direction point! Direction point!
A Doctor Who Podcast Network.